What is up, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of Father Dynasty. I'm your host, Chu, here to talk fatherhood, fantasy football, and everything in between. And with me today is a very special guest. He is going to have to serve as my therapist on this episode as I navigate the trauma that is being a Panthers fan at this moment. Follow him on Twitter at Steve_FOP and check out his fantasy football content on YouTube as the co-founder of Front Office Pros, Steve Falco. Steve, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Chu, and I gotta say, we've been trying to get together now to be on the Father Dynasty podcast for a while, and I have to say, the stars are aligning because this is a great privilege that I get to be your therapist and get to talk about this Panthers trade, which might be one of the biggest trades they've made in quite some time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in terms of your hourly rate as a therapist, you can probably charge whatever you want because it's going to take a lot from me today.
Fair enough.
Well, Steve, are you ready for a keep trade cut unique to you?
Am I ever?
I have to choose my favorite. I'm going to keep.
Oh, dear. I will trade.
This is kind of wild.
The cut is easy, and it's the last one.
The first topic we have on here is DNP, which, of course, is did not participate as it relates to the NFL Combine. So these are three Combine drills or activities that are commonly known, and let's see how you would fare in each of these activities. Keep would be maybe you'd think you do the best, and cut, you'd think you do the worst. So these three are the 40-yard dash, the bench press, and the three-cone drill.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. I've never been much of a gym rat. So I'm one of those people who always, it's idealistic to want to go to the gym, but I wish I was better at it, but I never am consistent enough for it. So I think I got to cut the bench press because realistically, if as far as my performance goes, I feel like it wouldn't be as good. My next one, I think I'm going to go with the 40-yard dash as my keep. I've torn my ACL in the past, so that three-cone drill, I don't know how tight I'm going to be to the cone. So I think I'll trade. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot the trade piece. You know what? I'm going to cut the three-cone. I'm going to trade the bench press because there's probably somebody out there who can do 20, 30, 40 reps, and they'll take it easily. So I'll trade that, and I'm going to cut the three-cone.
I like that. And I have to ask if you want to share, how did you tear the ACL?
Oh, yeah, I can share. In college, I tore the ACL playing, I don't think it was two-hand touch football. It wasn't flag football. I was, sad enough. I was, my roommate at the time he was the RA and I was rooming with him and it was, hey, let's do this for the hall. And I said, okay, sure. I didn't really want to. And what do you know? I was playing safety for one of the plays, and it was a fly route. And I went to go, intercept it, and then I fell down, and he fell on my knee in wrong place, wrong time, and I tore my ACL.
Man, well, Sam, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm also sorry to hear that it's probably going to affect your three-cone drill negatively. But I think you'll more than make up for it in other areas. That's for sure.
Thank you, Chu. I appreciate it.
That's right. So, well, moving on to the second topic is The League, and it is not referenced to the show, but it is referenced to the many formats and scoring settings that we can have for all of our fantasy football leagues. And the three I've got here are IDP, Tight End Premium, and Superflex. So keep trade cut for those three. What are you thinking?
Oh, Chu, you gave me a tough list to include here. I like all of these formats a lot. I think at the end of the day, I'm going to keep IDP. And a lot of people don't play individual defensive player fantasy football. And I think a lot of the reasons why they don't is because there's not really a cookie cutter way to do it. With offense, it's easy. It's PPR, non-PPR, half PPR. That's really the only differentiator. Most of the other stuff is pretty standard. Maybe your quarterback will have 4 points for passing touchdown versus 6 points for passing touchdown. With defense, though, if you're going to do it right, you really have to when it comes to the scoring categories, you really have to weight them in a certain way based on the position. Because because that's why linebackers are always the top IDP players, because they get a ton of tackles, and your other defenders are not going to get it. And I don't really. So the league I'm in that does it it's very different, and I enjoy it. I don't think I would like a typical IDP league, because I really like that realism factor for me. So that's my keep. I would most likely trade Superflex. I'm a trader, so to me, I feel like I get a lot of value out of Superflex. It's definitely on the rise. I think more and more people are interested in it, and I like Superflex a lot. I don't like, again, that realism factor. I've never really liked that, your best quarterback is going in maybe the second or third round of your drafts. It just doesn't, the NFL is all about having a franchise quarterback, but then for fantasy, it's like, well, it doesn't really matter about your quarterback. And really, if you're good at fantasy, you should do the late round quarterback and get somebody in like the late rounds. So it just feels different. It's like, I can stream quarterbacks and win. So I would trade Superflex, and then I would cut tight end premium, only because I don't think it's absolutely necessary to have tight end premium. I do like it because I think it adds an extra strategy element when you have a tight end premium, because the whole tight end landscape is a wasteland. So having that adds a little bit of strategy where it's like, okay, maybe I should invest in Travis Kelce, because now the difference between him and the tight end, 12, 13, 15, whatever your league, it's big enough that it's actually worthwhile comparatively to, running backs or receivers. So that's for me. But
yeah, and in terms of IDP, that strikes me as something where if you're in IDP, I feel like it's not like a love-hate, but I feel like it's such, like, if you're going to do it, like, you're just IDP all the way. Like, I feel like that's something where it's like when you really dive into it, and there, like you're saying, there could be different scoring settings even within IDP. But when you kind of get used to, like, all right, you get a D lineman, you get a linebacker, you get a defensive back, or however it shakes out, and it's like you really have to be more invested in, oh, I'm going to stream this defense this week. It's much more granular than that, and you're really focusing on. Again, I think I joked to you when I had the opportunity of being on your podcast that the only time I played IDP, the big name was Paul Posluszny because of the tackling that he did for the Jaguars as a linebacker. And like that was something that really stuck out to me. I remember being like, it's not always the names that you maybe think of. Like, there's a couple, but then there's a couple other guys that are just tackle machines, or just other guys that are able to kind of, do a little bit of everything. So you maybe have a safety that, works a little bit inside the box, and he gets some tackles that way, maybe get some picks. So IDP is definitely an interesting one for me. And, man, Superflex, I feel like it's, at this point, it's almost like when you see people's rankings and that sort of thing, Superflex feels like that's almost the default. And then people have to, like, on the side kind of pepper in, like, oh, but in one quarterback, it would be this. Just kind of like a little on the side there.
Yeah, I mean, real quick on IDP, I think for me, I've really come to not like team defense. I've seen it too often. It's similar to kickers as well, but I've seen it too often that a team defense ends up scoring, like a New England Patriots defense scores you like 20 points, or usually it's your opponent, and then you lose the matchup because of some fluky thing. And that's just frustrating. Whereas if I'm watching the game and I have Myles Garrett and he gets a sack and a forced fumble, I'm like, okay. Yeah. Like, it feels less random, because you're committing to a certain player. And as far as Superflex goes, I agree with you. I think it's becoming more and more the norm. I'm in one league that's, I'd say, more of a deep league that has 16 teams in it. Ooh. I think I like that better than Superflex, but because I think it still has that same type of feel to it. Mm-hmm. But if I'm in a 12 or 14 team league, I definitely enjoy Superflex. I have a Superflex league I commission, and it's a lot of fun.
Nice. So, well, I know we'll talk about your favorite team here, and this is Bills and more Bills, and this is looking at some of the younger Bills looking to make an impact going into 2023. Okay. And the three we've got here, we've got James Cook, we've got Khalil Shakir, and the third one's a bit ambiguous. So it's the rookie to be determined. I know there's been a lot of rumblings of it. Could it be a Bijan going to Buffalo? Could it maybe be another receiver going there? So maybe that might change your perspective on who you think they're going to go with as maybe their first offensive skill player they take. But what do you think of that?
That's interesting. I think my cut would be Khalil Shakir. I like Shakir as a player, and you did see some flashes in the playoffs. I'm actually surprised they didn't use him more than they did. They didn't really use him that much. But to me, I feel like Shakir, I don't really know if he's going to get that role needed in order to make that step. Like, you got Diggs, you got Gabe Davis, and we'll be talking about this more later. We definitely need to add another receiver in there. Basically, then the question is, does Shakir take the next step forward to then it's Shakir? Or are we drafting someone or bringing someone in for agency? I just find it unlikely that Shakir takes that jump. I think he's going to have a role, but not enough that I think it's substantial. As far as James Cook goes, I think Devin Singletary is good as gone, unless he signs a team-friendly deal. So there's going to be a lot of people, especially in the fantasy football community and Dynasty, who are going to flock over to James Cook because, now it's James Cook's show. They'll add another running back. They're not going to just go with James Cook. I would highly doubt that. Now, if they were to get Bijan Robinson, that'd be a nightmare for Cook, and I'd almost wish they would trade him because at that point, Bijan Robinson's an all-purpose back. So why use a second-round pick for James Cook to then use a first-round pick for Bijan Robinson? That would be a tough pill to swallow. I hope that they could, figure something out there. I think at the end of the day, I'm going to trade Cook because I think, a lot of people are going to want him because they're going to flock to him, like I mentioned. And I think that we will add another running back. It's only a moment of time, so this would be a good time to trade. As far as the keep, though, I think it's the rookie. The question will be what side of the ball is it going to be? I think it's going to be offense because we've now seen the Bills. They've been on the rise. They've done really well, but I think they need more firepower, and I think they're going to address that by getting some sort of skill player, and I think they could make an immediate impact because their cap space, they're in the negative quite a bit. I want to say they're like negative 18. Now they can restructure, push some money down the road, and clear up cap space, but I don't think they're going to be big players, so that means we're going to have to find somebody in the draft.
Yeah, I think, thinking about James Cook, I wasn't incredibly high on him coming out of college, but then getting the opportunity in, being on the Bills where it's Singletary and he's okay and he does well, but it didn't seem like he had a stranglehold on that backfield necessarily. But then there's the running back situation where it's like, well, it's the Bills, so your leading running back is Josh Allen in terms of whether it only be yardage or whether it be yardage and touchdown, certainly when you get into the red zone. But, foolish not to use him. He's got the frame, he's got the capability to do that, and he's a threat to where if he's not going to run perfectly capable passing to a Dawson Knox or, Diggs on the outside. So I would be very excited to see if there was actually a Bijan Robinson going there to, I think, really unlock that offense to where they could also, again, like you said, still add another receiver there, but then it takes a lot of the pressure off of Josh Allen, his arm and his legs, and I think that would build incredibly well for Buffalo Bills as a whole.
It's so interesting. Yeah, I think he could. I just, when it comes to that discussion, because a lot of Bills fans that I talk to or listen to, or even just the national media, will say that all the Bills rely too much on Josh Allen. They need more of a running game. And the thing I wonder is, like, is it the chicken or the egg? Like, is it the offensive line? Like, if we had a better offensive line, could the likes of Cook and Singletary do as well so that they do so well that they don't have to worry about that? Or is it that we have a lack of talent in the running back position? And I don't know. It's, if we were to get a Bijan Robinson, if he wouldn't succeed, then we would know the answer, or vice versa. So I'm definitely intrigued by Bijan Robinson. And I think he's the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley. to come out of the NFL draft. My thoughts, I don't think he'll be there, but if he is, I guess that tells you how much the NFL teams have devalued the position, because they've been saying that for a long time. And when there's a prospect like Barkley, he gets drafted in the top. He was drafted number 2 overall, wasn't he?
I think so.
Yeah. So I mean, I could totally see Bijan Robinson getting drafted in the top 10, but we'll see.
Yeah. Say, well, in terms of we'll see, I know we are now on the heels of the NFL Combine, and this is kind of the in-between between the Combine. You have NFL free agency, and for whatever reason they call it legal tampering window about to open up here in a bit. So now we're left to kind of salivate over the incredible showings at the Combine, as well as lament over someone like Kayshon Boutte being incredibly slow and not athletic. But for you, who was your biggest riser and your biggest faller from the Combine?
Yeah, we had recently on our front office pros channel, we recently had Joe and Dustin and we were talking about it some. And I think, it's hard not to say the biggest riser is Anthony Richardson, right? I mean, he broke records for his athleticism. He, had, I believe it was a 4.44 40-yard dash. So, and he's got that big frame as well. So it's not just the speed, it's the combination of the speed and the size. You saw, I feel like I've seen that replay of him running for that touchdown against LSU. I feel like I've seen it like 5 or 6, 7 times. I'll probably see it even more, and it'll probably be on draft night as well. But the other impressive piece was his accuracy was the biggest knock on him, and rightfully so. I think it was like 53% completion percentage, or right around that number. And when you watched him in those drills, I thought he was pretty accurate. I thought a lot of those throws that he made, maybe they weren't CJ Stroud-esque, where they were literally just being dropped right in the basket, but they were good enough. They looked really good, and I was really impressed with his deep ball. I think he had the best throw of the day, where, when he's throwing it deep, there are some receivers where they kind of like slow down a little bit and then catch the ball. But there was one where, and I forgot who it was that caught it, but they were running in stride. Like, they didn't slow down. They were running in stride, and it just dropped right there.
Yeah.
So I think that now, mind you, he's not in pads, right? It's easy for them to just throw it around the yard, and it's not as impressive if there's pass rushers and everything else. But to me, I think Anthony Richardson is got to be the number one riser, because before it was Levis, now it's Richardson. I think Richardson probably I could see him going top 3. They're talking about Stroud going number 1 right now. That's the buzz. Who knows? That could be a smokescreen. Texans are going to take a quarterback. Probably, I would think, either Stroud or Bryce Young, I would think. And then you got the Cardinals, and that could be a possible trade-up spot for Richardson. I very much believe that Richardson will be drafted in the top 10 as of today. That's what I think.
Yeah, and in terms of what Richardson was able to do, I was texting with some of my buddies, and I think the easiest way I could explain it, I was like, well, with both of those guys, with Richardson and with Stroud, it did confirm what we already thought in a general sense, that Stroud's I hate to say this term, Stroud's a great thrower of the football. I know it's a very general term, but in terms of like his understanding and his processing and his placement with the ball, he's got the good frame and he's got a good arm. Everything that you would generally want in a quarterback. And again, flash some of that mobility. Granted, it wasn't a loss ending his college career there, but again, he put on the best show he possibly could have. And with Anthony Richardson, him only starting, I believe it was 13 games in college, and that's his knock. His knock is his accuracy. I completely understand that. He is, I'm pretty sure he's about 8 months even younger than Stroud. And so, just the youth and the inexperience at the quarterback position, I think, is apparent. And I'm not saying, if he would have had another year of college, starting in college under his belt, he would be just as accurate as Stroud. I don't mean that, but I do sincerely believe that if you've got someone who can run a Lamar Jackson 40 in the body of Derrick Henry and just for fun can do a standing backflip, I feel like that amount of athleticism at the quarterback position if you can hone it in some way and, have the offensive system, have the coaches and everything that can best harness his abilities and, limit, what his weaknesses are as he's growing into being a better quarterback. I do think he can certainly improve his processing and accuracy, but if he were to go to Carolina, let's say, the coaching staff that they've assembled there, I really think that if he's going into the right place, the place that can help mold him into a better quarterback, I think that allows him to hit his ceiling. I think if you have him go to maybe a situation that isn't so great, maybe if he goes to, I'm not too keen on the Raiders personally, if it was something like that, whereas like, the organization as a whole doesn't seem to be in a great place. The hope is that they're going to turn it around, but history tells us I don't know if that's going to be the case. Then I think he could just kind of crumble and fall apart, and it would be a waste of a tremendous talent. But yeah, at the combine, he rose his stock, and I think, for whatever amount of value people really give to the combine and the results, the eye test of watching someone be very athletic it's just fun. It really is.
It really is. And, I think from an NFL standpoint, I think he probably was a borderline first-round pick before the combine. Mm-hmm. Now I think he's locked into that top 15, top 10 range. So that's a pretty big rise. Yep. And then as far as dynasty leagues go in Superflex, you're talking about Anthony Richardson possibly being the number one quarterback drafted. I mean, depending on your risk tolerance, I know I've seen a couple messages by you that, it's like the ceiling is so off the charts that it's like, man, I feel like I need to take this guy. So that was not happening. It was, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Levis, and then maybe Richardson towards the end of your first round of your rookie drafts. Not anymore. I don't see him in Superflex leagues getting past 4 or 5. So, and he could even go, number 2, and possibly if somebody would rather have him instead of Bijan, I would be surprised, but things happen. So I think he definitely had a huge rise. And when it comes to Stroud, I'm with you. I think how I describe him, he's the prototypical size. He makes all the throws, but he's just vanilla. Like it doesn't like, whereas like you've got the vanilla ice cream in CJ Stroud. You've got the Superman ice cream in Anthony Richardson. And then Bryce Young, I don't know, maybe we'll call him mint chocolate chip. I don't know. But when it comes to Bryce Young, he's more cerebral, but I think he's got that magic element where he just makes some throws that are just like, whoa. Like that's like he reads the defense, he makes this incredible, and he's more mobile than people give him credit for. So it's very interesting. It's like I think CJ Stroud's a great quarterback, but for me personally, I'm more enamored by Richardson for what he can bring, and then also Bryce Young for what he can bring. Where I'm like with Stroud, I'm kind of like it's good, but it doesn't catch my eye. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and. This was early on. It was before the combine and all that. I don't remember who the person was that had comped this, but I heard someone mention something about Stroud kind of being comped to like a Jared Goff. And people may forget coming out of college, I mean, a hot prospect. And, if what he's shown, he was basically left for dead, being sent away from the Rams, and he was included in a trade to the Lions. But I don't think anyone saw it as, they're actually going to see this contract out and not release him or not try and trade him or something. And I mean, it really, if they want to, they could ride this contract out. They could. I've heard the rumblings of if they're going to add somebody behind him, let them learn behind him and still be able to compete at the same time, not just be waiting for someone else to take the reins. I think Goff has shown if he's given time, he can pick defenses apart. And that's very much what if Stroud does go to a good situation where he's given time and can process, he's going to pick defenses apart. And that's from an NFL standpoint, like, real football standpoint, that's great. And from a fantasy standpoint, great as well. But I know it requires enough passing volume to be notable enough to overshadow the fact of the rushing ability. It's there, but it's not as instinct. And that's okay to keep him healthy, hopefully, but it's not going to help us for fantasy. And we're selfish.
We are selfish.
Well, speaking of being selfish, I know we are right on the heels of this news breaking, but I, of course, selfishly would love to talk about it. The trade today, as of only a couple hours ago, the Panthers and the Bears. So the Panthers now acquiring the 101 from the Bears for, I'll call it a king's ransom, but then I'll actually explain what that means. The 9th pick, the 61st pick, a 2024 first, a 2025 second, and, breaks my heart, DJ Moore. So the Panthers get their chance, whoever they believe. I heard rumblings after this was even done that it at least gives them control, so that if they're like a couple people, they're like, oh, okay, we'll trade back one or two. I don't know why they would have paid what they did to then do that, but that neither here nor there. So what are your thoughts from the first side, looking at what the Panthers have now in the 101?
Well, Chew, before I go, I need to put my therapist hat on, and I need to ask, how does this make you feel?
Distraught, if I'm being honest.
Why do you feel distraught, Chew?
Well, I will say, as someone who has been championing Anthony Richardson from a dynasty perspective, I'm someone who in most scenarios would look to take Anthony Richardson, accepting that risk and understanding that it could turn out fairly poorly, certainly if he's not in the right situation. But the ceiling is incredible. And in my mind, I was kind of hoping that he would be able to go somewhere that he would. So if he went to Detroit, say, he would be able to sit behind Goff and then step in after a year or so. But if he's going in and starting, again, it still needs to be a great situation. I want that to be Carolina now, and I would be okay with that. But gosh, that's a lot to give up. When I see those firsts and the seconds, and I also see DJ Moore, it's really tough for me because his contract was not too terrible from the standpoint of what he did as a producer, and as seemingly, just a good role model for a player in Charlotte and for the Carolina Panthers as a whole. I know you can't really put a number on that. But when I look at what the rest of the roster looks like, I know they're going to still have more people to add in the draft. I know they have a decent amount of cap space after some restructures, so they can add some people too. But it's really just tough to see DJ Moore being added on top of that, even if they get their guy at the 101. But it really adds a lot of pressure to Reich and Tepper and Fitterer and all them. They have to get this. This has to be right. I'm not saying they're going to have nothing after this if it's not right, but it's going to take a while to rebuild that back up.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, so maybe this will console you. I actually think it's a great move by the Panthers. I know they gave up a good amount. I don't think it's excessive to the point of, if you look at other trades in the past, that it would make you think like, oh, wow, like they gave up an arm and a leg, and what were the Panthers thinking? I think, and I kind of had shared this recently, it's really the perfect blend, I believe, of head coach, GM, and owner. Because David Tepper, as you know, has been chomping at the bit to try to get a franchise quarterback in. They were in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, and they could have gave even more for Deshaun Watson, and look what he looks like right now with the Browns. He doesn't look so good. So they've been wanting that quarterback for some time. Now for Frank Reich was with the Colts, and he had a quarterback roulette. He had, you know what I mean? He dealt with Matt Ryan most recently, Carson Wentz, Phillip Rivers, and, at the end of the day, Jim Irsay just was like, I'm done, and got rid of Reich. I actually think Reich's a good coach. I like Reich a lot, and I think him coming to Carolina with that coaching staff, he's built around him, with Jim Caldwell, with Josh McCown as the quarterback coach. I think he's got, and Deuce Staley as the running back coach, I think he's got a dynamite staff, even just beyond OC and DC. Looking at positional coaches, I think the Panthers are in good shape. So now they get their guy. My question will be, what guy is it? And I wouldn't be surprised. I believe Jacoby Brissett's a free agent, and he's got familiarity with Reich. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in a guy like Brissett, and maybe then they do draft an Anthony Richardson and have him develop. The downside of all this is to your point, they did give up their 2024 first. And I think that first is going to be a high one, but that means that for them, tanking won't help them at all. So for them, they want to put the best product on the field and try to win games. So I think at the end of the day, they end up getting the guy they want. I'll be very curious. I'm curious to see what you think. Because you as a fan, you read all the news and buzz and rumors. I'd be curious to see who you think they're going to take. But to me, they finally are going to be able to start off on the right foot with the quarterback that they want to build around, which is so important. I know they got rid of DJ Moore, and DJ Moore was beloved in Carolina, like you said. He was a great player. But maybe DJ Moore isn't the type of receiver that Frank Reich wants in his offense, and that's where it was okay for them to part ways, with DJ Moore. I mean, at the end of the day, even if they had DJ Moore, this team was not going to – yes, the NFC South is wide open, but even with it wide open, they were not going to be a deep playoff or championship team. This was going to be a few years in the making for them. So that's why, to me, I like it for the Panthers personally.
I like that. I feel a little bit better now. Yeah, the good thing is the NFC South is atrocious, and I would argue it's the worst division in football.
Yeah,
maybe at best second worst. So that does help in the sense of it gives whoever the Panthers do take, it gives them that year. If it is Anthony Richardson, C.J. Stroud, I don't think it's going to be Young, but it could be wrong. It gives them at least that year to get familiar with the offense and to grow within it. To even if they don't have their 2024 first, there's other ways to add weapons. It's tough to it's not right in front of you saying you have DJ Moore to throw to. I already know they don't have a tight end. No offense to Tommy Tremble, and it's tough to kind of imagine what it could be because it's adding more, I guess, dice to roll into the mix. But they do have, again, top to bottom, one of the best coaching staffs I've seen assembled. They hired almost all of the people that were interviewing for the head coaching job. They just hired all of them on the staff. I've never seen that done before, which I think speaks well to Frank Reich and what everybody thinks of him as a leader and a coach. I think that speaks well to David Tepper understanding that you can pay coaches whatever you want. It doesn't affect the salary cap, so he has no problem paying these guys what they're worth, and it is what they're worth. I think they all bring something good to the offense and the defense and everything. So I'm optimistic only because I have to be, because otherwise it wouldn't go so well. But it's going to be a lot of nerves until we really get there, until they make that pick, until we see how OTAs go, until we see what other weapons they add. But for now, I'm nervous but optimistic, I guess.
Yeah, draft night's going to be a lot of fun, I think. Now it could be heartbreak because if they draft Will Levis, you're going to be. I'm going to see you throwing like something at your TV, and then that's going to be a GIF that you'll have to send me that I can use on Twitter. But I want to ask you, who at this point in time, who do you want them to take at number one, and then who do you think they'll take at number one? As our resident Panthers fan, I want to hear what you think.
I want it to be Anthony Richardson, and despite a lot of the buzz, I know with Josh McCown, I know people kept throwing up everything of like his analysis of looking at each of the quarterbacks, and then Stroud really stuck out as, with his analysis of Stroud, they're like, oh, well, they have the 101. Obviously, it's going to be Stroud. Why would they not do that? I feel like they've already identified who it's going to be. They said the smoke screen of, oh, yeah, we have the one now, but we have the power. So if we ultimately feel like it's between two guys, we'll trade back one or whatever. I don't know why they do that. That's silly to me, but I have to believe it is actually going to be Anthony Richardson. I don't think it's because of the combine. Again, I think that reinforced what everybody already knew, but I'm sure behind the scenes they were already talking to the Bears. I already thought they were going to trade up. I didn't think it was going to be to the 101. I thought it was going to be probably the Cardinals pick just to make sure they could get one of those top three quarterbacks. And kind of for the same reason what I think of Anthony Richardson in Dynasty, I see it similarly in the NFL in the sense of if you have that good of a coaching staff, a stable offensive line, can add weapons, do have a solid defense, and play in an atrocious division, I think Anthony Richardson can do it for real in the NFL as well, just like Dynasty. I think they can insulate him enough if it's establishing a running game and kind of keeping the offense simple as he's growing and adding more tools to his tool chest. But Still makes me nervous though.
So basically, you would rather swing for the home run and strike out than not go for the home run at all.
100%. And also, I suck at baseball, so that's.
well, let's hope the Panthers don't strike out then.
Oh yeah, but so what would you say? Kind of flipping that script and looking at the other side, though. What do you feel like this does for the Bears? So them getting a couple of picks, them going to the 9th. I mean, you're still going to get a top 10 pick. Maybe go defense because you now have a receiver to pair with Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool, which I thought wasn't a great trade, but now he's your third receiver, so maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, Bears got a plethora of picks. I mean, no matter who they traded with, I think they were going to get a good amount. And to me, 2 firsts and 2 seconds, I think would have been the floor. They got that. I think the big thing for me is the DJ Moore aspect, because now we've seen the Bears trade for DJ Moore, and then they also trade for Chase Claypool, like you said. So what does that say about what they think of this wide receiver draft class? Because the big thing was they need to get weapons around Justin Fields, and I think that's a appropriate criticism. He needed other people around him so that he can take that next step. But I had heard, I think this is right, and you could verify this, but I think the Panthers are willing to add in an additional first-round pick, and Ryan Poles and the Bears were like, oh, actually, no, we'd rather have DJ Moore. And that's where instead they got DJ Moore. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. I thought I had heard that. So to me, it's fitting that mold. You've seen it with Josh Allen when they traded for Stephon Diggs. Josh Allen took off. You saw Jalen Hurts when they traded for A.J. Brown. You saw him. He took off. You saw Tua. They traded for Tyreek Hill. He had a career year. So all these guys ended up having career years after that. I think the same thing will happen to Fields. I'm not a Fields fan. I'm definitely much lower on him than the industry. But there's no doubt it definitely helps them. I think as far as the draft is concerned, they'll have hit a home run if they could get Jalen Carter at 9. I don't know if he'll be there. It's possible that he could slide because of all the off-the-field concerns with that warrant for his arrest for the reckless driving. So it'll be interesting to monitor. But I think it's hard not to like it as a Bears fan because you're getting a above-average receiver in the NFL, and you're adding 2 firsts and 2 seconds, and you have a ton of picks as it is.
I completely agree. I think, especially if they are able to get Carter at 9, I think that would be the perfect kind of, not end point, but the other side of the coin when it comes to the last couple of years, trading away a couple of these players, and you trade away Khalil Mack, you trade away some of these other guys where it's like, are we getting enough? Like, these are impact players. What are we doing? And again, going into last season, looking at what their offense was going to be, it's like they must not like Justin Fields, because if he can thrive in this, it's because he's elite or he can run really well. But they certainly were not surrounding him with people that before the Claypool trade that I felt like allowed him to, really grow as a passer. Although I do love Cole Kmet, if I'm being completely honest, but now you're seeing, okay, even if he takes a step back as a rusher, it's not because he doesn't have the ability. It's because he wants to, and he has the ability to throw to DJ Moore, a healthy Darnell Mooney, hopefully improved Chase Claypool, still Cole Kmet as well. And I'm a big Khalil Herbert fan, so him out of the backfield, I'm sure they're going to keep Montgomery, maybe add somebody else in the running back room as well. So I think the arrow is pointing straight up for the Bears, and I think after a couple of years of trading away talent, I think they finally feel like we have our quarterback, we're getting this receiver, and I feel like they're just seeing it as this is the opportunity to strike while the iron's hot, and that's all you can want as a fan of a team. So
yeah, I agree, and I think most Bears fans came to the realization that they were going with a tear down. When Ryan Poles came in last year and they traded away Khalil Mack, that was just the beginning. Then they ended up trading Roquan Smith, which I still don't know really if that is going to end up being a good trade for them. I mean, Roquan Smith is just an elite linebacker, and I think what he got paid at $20 million a year is not really outrageous. I know, maybe teams don't want to pay off-ball linebackers that much and have that much of their salary cap allocated to that. So maybe that's just his strategy, the front office and the Bears. But to me, what I won't like about this, if the Bears, depending on what happens and who's available at 9, if they keep trading back, I'm not going to like it. I understand the idea that it's always like, well, we always want to trade back. But it's, excuse me, at some point, if you continue to trade back and trade back and trade back and trade back, I feel like there's diminishing returns there. And so I feel like at that 9 spot, there maybe aren't that many blue chip players, but you're still talking about in that blue chip territory. If you start just continuing to trade back, it's like, oh, I'm going to collect more picks. Well, eventually you have to take somebody. So I hope for their sake that they don't just continue to slide down. To me, I think that wouldn't serve them well.
Yeah, and I think in my mind, when I was thinking of them trading back, if it was multiple times, I was thinking it was you're trading back not from 1 to 9, but you're trading from, say, like 1 to a shorter distance just for another team, like the Colts, to make sure they get the quarterback or whatever. And then it's like, oh, from 5. Then they figure out, are they going to trade back to the early teens or something? So I don't know. I mean, going from 1 to 9, I would hope they're not going to trade back much further. If they do, hopefully still within the top 15. But at the 109, if you're going to assume that the quarterbacks are gone, I don't know who would offer enough for them to trade back. But of course, it always depends on who you're looking for. But I want to go ahead and you can take your therapist hat off for now and put on whatever other hat you want to put on, because if you have a Bills one, that'd be great, because we can talk about your team, Bills Mafia. So what were your thoughts on the Bills 2022 season?
Yeah, I do have a Bills hat around here, but I'd have to leave, so not going to do that. But, when it comes to the Bills season, I think it's a combination, right? It was exciting because you were talking about the Bills as like the Super Bowl favorite for a lot of people. The Bills were irrelevant for decades until we finally got a good quarterback, a great quarterback, an elite quarterback in Josh Allen. And then things started to change. Once we got the regime of McDermott and Bean, and then drafting Allen, which I wanted Allen. I was the guy I wanted. I reminded of a time I was watching with a few close friends of mine. We were watching the Bills, and one friend of mine in particular really wanted Rosen. So it was Josh Rosen and Josh Allen. And so when we were at the draft, Roger Goodell's like, Josh. And then we're on like pins and needles waiting. And it's like, Allen. And I was like, yes. And he's like, oh, no. So, but we'll see how that worked out. But, and even like the opener, which I would never have conceived the idea that the Bills would play on the opener of the NFL season. Because the Bills are irrelevant. Why would they be on the opener? So for them to be there and to beat the Rams, it was exciting. I think where the disappointment came was, obviously we got beat up pretty bad against the Bengals. We hadn't had a type of loss like that really all season. I think all of our games, it was a 1-score game. That was like the first game that it was like, we got beat bad. And why I'm actually more disappointed, or it was more of a frustrating loss, I feel like, in a way, for me this go round than the year before, which I think some Bills fans would be like, how could that be possible with the 13-second game? Like, we were right there. And I get that, but that's kind of how I felt. Like, we were right there. As for this most recent game, it was like, it seems like the Bengals and the Bills, there's actually a decent divide between them. I was saying all along, man, if we would have just beaten the Chiefs, we would have went home and we would have beat the Bengals for sure. And now looking back, I'm like, I don't know if that's really that true. So I think that's why it's disappointing, because especially right now when you're talking about the Bills being $18 million over the cap, and you're losing guys like Poyer, most likely, and potentially Tremaine Edmonds, I think that's where I'm more disappointed, because I feel like the window's closing. Now, some would say, like, how could you possibly say the window's closing? You have Josh Allen. That's true. Having Josh Allen and having one of the best quarterbacks in the league will always make it so that the window's open. But a lot of our really good guys are aging, right? Tre'Davious White's getting older. Matt Milano's getting older. Micah Hyde's already old. Von Miller, how many years does he have? 1 or 2 years left. Stephon Diggs, I think he's 28. He's getting older. So it's like, if we don't win within these next 1 to 2 years with the stacked AFC, with all the quarterbacks they have in the AFC, it's like, yes, we could still make it, but we basically have to reshuffle the deck and bring in a whole new team, basically, of players around Josh Allen. Because now you got to replace Diggs. Now you got to replace Vaughn. Now you got to replace Micah Hyde. You're already starting to see that now with the possibility of Poyer and Edmonds gone. So it's like, can we still match up with the Chiefs and the Bengals? And can we get over the top? I don't know. So that's where I'm feeling, going into this free agency period and draft, I'm feeling a little bit less optimistic, because I'm like, where to now? Maybe I'll feel differently after free agency and the draft, but for now, that's kind of where I'm feeling.
Yeah, I'm looking at how the Bills did last year. I know there was a lot of injuries on the defense, I think specifically with the defensive backs. But otherwise, I know they still have plenty of capable defenders. And again, having such a high-powered offense, you can kind of hope that doesn't counter an injured defense. But with Josh Allen, it's funny looking at what his stats were this year versus last year. And the narrative this year, certainly towards the end of the season, talking about his interceptions and just overall making it sound like, he's not the guy, but just like, he's not what we thought he was last year. It's like, at least for fantasy's sake, he's 0.3 points less per game in 2022 than he was in 2021. Looking at everything else, I mean, it wasn't a tremendously different statistical season for Josh Allen than it was last year. But there's a lot of things that went the right way for the team as a whole, and it felt more like him having to put, or whether he had to or just felt like he had to put the team on his back. And it's a very large back, but at a certain point, he does, as you point out, a lot of those key positions and key players, they're all kind of getting to that point at the same time age-wise. It's interesting that it's not so much staggered. I know, I guess Von Miller would be the oldest of the couple you were talking about, but it is still, the age for, so when a wide receiver is, getting closer to 30, that's old. It's like, yeah, that is wild to think that Diggs is already closer to that. It feels like only yesterday when they acquired him, and then that just elevated the team immediately. And I think last season really highlighted, they're really looking for that other guy. Is it Gabe Davis? I don't think so, but I think Gabe Davis is a great support piece. But I think that you need more than Diggs and support pieces. You do need Diggs and, someone else that, I know Stephon Diggs don't grow on trees, but if you're able to get another, solid player to play alongside him, then, the burden does not fall strictly on him. But I am hoping that, it's a much tougher conference for the Bills, but I do hope that, things go right for the Bills in this upcoming season, and at least you get to see a better opportunity for them to make it to the Super Bowl. But, I mean, their games are so exciting. I mean, when you have Josh Allen as quarterback, the games are just more exciting. You always feel like they're in it, and you always feel like, you're one highlight play away from a game to remember. So I'm sure as a Bills fan, that's a great thing to have under center.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said that, because, I don't want to come across as like I'm a Debbie Downer over here, because, it's a very exciting time to be a Bills fan. I mean, we had the longest playoff drought, and it was very frustrating. That's why I probably enjoy the draft so much, because it's like, hey, we're going to have a top pick. Who are we going to take? So for me, it's when it comes to the Bills, having a quarterback like Josh Allen, you're right. It just makes the games so much more exciting. And the Bills are one of the best teams in the league. So honestly, like just being able to compete and be one of those teams, obviously, I just want one. Just give us one Super Bowl. That's all I want. We've never won one before. It would be just nice to have one. But at the end of the day, I am a football fan and I enjoy watching it. And having your own team be good, really good, makes it for a lot of fun. So if we never win, it's definitely a lot brighter. We got a new stadium coming in, in a few years. That'll be really cool to be able to witness that. So I think it's up and up for the Bills. It just we gotta get over the hump somehow, and if not, then we're just one of those. Now we're the playoff team that's really good, but we just can't get it to the Super Bowl. We were for the non-playoff team, so it's just a different mindset.
Well, I know you didn't specifically say this. I don't want you to pigeonhole yourself as the Andy Dalton Cincinnati Bengals because that's just not you. Okay.
Okay.
So we're gonna do playoffs and Super Bowl every year. At least try.
There we go. There we go.
Well, I know you've touched on it a bit in terms of just different things with the Bills offseason, how 2022 went. What would be maybe some of your key points as an ideal blueprint for what you'd want them to be doing leading into the 2023 season?
Yeah, I think for me, cap space is going to be limited. I mean, the dream scenario is we're able to bring Poyer and Tremaine Edmonds back somehow, some way. I highly doubt it based on the reports and what I've seen. So maybe we get one of them back. I think that's maybe more realistic. I mean, they could easily restructure Josh Allen's contract and Von Miller's contract and be able to get one of those guys in there. And I think they will. I don't think they'll be completely dormant in free agency. I could be wrong about that, but I would be surprised if they didn't do anything. I definitely think they need a receiver. I do think the criticism of Josh Allen last year was unfair due to, I think, his UCL injury really affected him more so than it was being let on. And he even in some postseason comments, he had expressed how it really was not till the end until he really felt like himself and was throwing the way that he's familiar with. So I do think that hampered him and us. And I have my concerns with our offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey. Former Panther, in the Panthers organization. I just feel that Dorsey, maybe he'll get better in his second year, but just different videos I had watched of the offense, it really made it so that Josh kind of had to play hero ball. He didn't really have reads where it's like, okay, 1, 2, 3. It was he kind of had to figure it out on his own, and maybe that's how he likes to play that way. But I think it meant for more turnovers, and I think we could have been more efficient in offense. I think the big thing we need is another receiver. I'm with you. I like Gabe Davis a lot, but he's not a number 2 receiver. We really need another receiver to come in. I know we had been rumored to possibly get Odell. I think that's still on the table. I don't really know how much he's going to bring to the table. I still think he's got juice. I think he's going to be good. I'd be okay with him coming. And I think if I had to guess, I think that's possibly what the Bills front office is doing, is saying, hey, we had the number 1 defense last year. And we had Josh Allen on our offense, and we still weren't able to get it done. So I think they possibly are saying, you know what, we need to fight fire with fire, and we need to start making our offense that much better. So to me, they need to get a receiver. That's like the number 1 priority in my mind that they need to do. My preference would be Jackson Smith and Jigba. Excuse me, I don't think he'll be there. That's the problem. I think he's going to be long gone. But that 3-cone drill was really impressive, and he would fit right in the slot, and I think he would do really well in that role. We've seen what Cole Beasley has been able to do over the past few years, and I think Jackson Smith and Jigbo is even more electric, obviously, way more electric than Beasley, but you know what I'm saying. The other player I like is I'm pretty high on Zay Flowers. I think I saw recently he was compared to a Steve Smith-esque type of player, which Brandon Bean, hey, there you go. I couldn't tell what it was because I only see it from down here, so it could really be anything. But as far as Steve Smith, Bean and McDermott are from that Panthers, organization. I don't know. I'm not sure if there was any overlap there, but I wouldn't be surprised if they end up getting a guy like Zay Flowers. So those are the two guys that I would want in the draft if we weren't to get a free agent like Odell. I probably would prefer the draft just because like Diggs is getting older. So I kind of want that person to be able to kind of pass the baton to. So I'd say that's kind of my ideal. My ideal would be hopefully being able to bring back Edmonds or Poyer and then addressing the receiver position. I prefer it in the draft. If they were to be able to get Odell, then I feel like they could go interior offensive line. I don't know how I feel about that. I think there are so many offensive linemen that end up doing really well, and they were 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round picks. I don't really know if you need to have a 1st round interior offensive lineman. And then sure, we could always go pass rusher, but I feel like we've drafted pass rusher so many times with Greg Rousseau and Boogie Basham and AJ Epinesa. I think it would probably be best player available, and hopefully, maybe it's a safety to replace Jordan Poyer. Maybe it's a linebacker to replace Edmonds. Maybe it's a defensive tackle, like Kalijah Cansey, and maybe they think that they're not going to pay Ed Oliver next year. I don't know. It'd probably be someone kind of. I can't think of the word, but basically in development to take over for somebody else in the future.
And just a little note, Boogie Basham went to the high school I went to. Shout that out there. Yep.
Well, there you go.
He, of course, is younger than me because I'm an old person. But it's always good to see some stud NFL players coming out of Northside High School, so represent.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, in terms of the Bills, if they can get JSN, that'd be incredible. What they've been able to do with their slot players over the years, when it was the Jamison Crowder, the Cole Beasley, and then Cole Beasley again, it's doing that, but then doing that with JSN. That size, that quickness, that would be an absolute boon for, I feel like, Josh Allen's comfort when he's looking to throw the ball and not feeling like it has to be Diggs, which he's plenty comfortable with that, and Diggs is plenty capable. But like you're saying, getting younger at that position, if you're able to have JSN or, like you said, Zay Flowers, he's someone who I do love that comparison to Steve Smith. It's always very tough for me to agree with a comparison to Steve Smith, only because I know he's very unique, and not just his size, but what he did with his size. I again, even till this day, I've never seen that before. Like that tenacity, like that intensity in a body that is my height. He's obviously more muscular than me, even today, but it's unbelievable. Him being a Triple Crown, one of the very few Triple Crown receivers. But I think Zay Flowers, he's got that pretty bulky build, incredibly shifty. I think he would be an exciting electric player that, he's a bit smaller height-wise, but he's, I think, bulky enough to be that'd be exciting to see a Steve Smith comparison, or a very scaled-down Debo. I know Debo is a couple inches taller, but is a bulky type build. So that'd be very exciting. And, yeah, as long as they're not taking too much of a step back in defense, that is a good point, that if they're just going to kind of lean into the fact that we need offense, and, despite Sean McDermott, coming over as the DC from Carolina, getting that head coaching gig in Buffalo, it's good to hang your hat on defense. But, yeah, nowadays, I mean, you've got your quarterback, and give him the weapons and let him thrive in what is a tough conference. And if they're able to scoot through that conference and come up against whoever's representing the other side, it won't feel easier, but I feel like it's such a slog to get through that conference to make it to the Super Bowl on that side. So if they can do that, that says a lot about the team.
Yeah, and I will say, I didn't mention him. I think Bijan Robinson is going to be an absolute stud. And a part of me would really like him being there. I think the problem is having James Cook and already using second round draft capital on him. But I will say, again, McDermott and Bean came from Carolina, and from that tree of Dave Gettleman, at least from the GM side, which I know you probably don't really like him very much, but they believed in drafting Christian McCaffrey very high. And I think Bean is kind of cut from a similar cloth. So it would not surprise me if they were to draft Bijan Robinson, because I do think that he values the position more so than other general managers. So I think it is realistic, if he's there, that we would take him. I would just hope that if they did that, they would then try to trade James Cook, because I see Bijan Robinson as an all-purpose back. And if they weren't to use him to his fullest capability, that would be tough. I mean, it would be a fantasy nightmare, because people are drafting him at the 101, and then they're going to see that, and he's going to share with James Cook. I think people could be ripping their hair out. So that's why for my dynasty leagues, no rookie draft is happening until after free agency and after the draft. There's no reason to draft right now. I know there's this window of time where it's like, oh, well, there's no football on Sunday, so, let's do this. And it's like, yeah, like, okay, if you want to scratch that itch, fine. But then after you do it, you're going to be like, well, now what? So to me, take the time, prepare for your draft, do research, look into the prospects, enjoy the mock draft season, look at the draft, then you see the landing spots. It's like, savor it, like, I think people want this like quick thrill, like, let me go get a cheeseburger, from a fast food restaurant. That's fine. But instead, get that filet mignon and just savor it. It's a good, hearty, healthy meal. There's no reason you have to eat it right away.
I have not had dinner yet, so now I am starving.
I haven't either, actually. So well, I'm right with you.
Yeah, this is definitely that season where last year, my first time getting into best ball, and I feel like between just traditional mock drafts that pop up on Twitter and some low stakes best ball, but just done kind of like throughout the offseason, it kind of allows you to not only scratch that itch like you're saying, but it also allows you to kind of see in real time. It's not just tracking and saying, oh, what does ADP say? What does this say? You're actually getting to over the weeks and over the months see how things are changing, certainly see how landing spots, once you actually have them, are really impacting how people draft. And that's for rookie drafts. If you have those closer to the season, that's for more redraft leagues if people are still doing those. I know plenty of people I have a couple that I've been doing since I was much younger that we've just kind of kept up. So Steve, we've got to talk some Panthers. We've got to talk some Bills. I think we're both in a good spot. And if we need to console one another, if one or both of our teams imploded in the offseason, we'll address that a couple months down the road. But guest always gets the last word. So a shout out, a quote, a cheers, anything you want to throw out there.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you for inviting me and bringing me on the Father Dynasty podcast. This has been a blast. I've truly enjoyed it. And, I would just say, if you enjoy fantasy football, would love for you to follow us on Twitter, Front Office Pros. We're also on YouTube. If you could like and subscribe to our channel. We just started Front Office Pros right before the 2022 season. Myself and my friends who are makeup Front Office Pros, we've been playing fantasy football for, years, 10 plus, 12 plus years. And it just got to the point where it was like, let's give this a shot. So, but we like to talk about redraft, but we also like to dig into other topics like Dynasty. We didn't talk about this, Drew, but I primarily only do auction leagues. I don't actually like snake drafts all that much. I just find auction drafts have so much more strategy to them. So I really enjoy auction, but also IDP. We like to talk about individual defensive player. I like to talk about, salary cap, type of stuff. I'm in a contract salary league. It's a lot of fun. So we try to talk about some other topics that I feel like don't normally get the love, if I will, from the industry at large. A lot of it's focused on redraft and ADP, and it's just like snake draft, and it's just that's the talk. So we try to talk about other things, and we're also on Spotify and Apple now as well. So you can add Front Office Pros on there as well. We would greatly appreciate it. I know, Chu, you've been on our show before, and we loved having you. I know we're going to be having you on again. But any support from the fantasy football community would be greatly appreciated, as we're just trying to grow it the best we can and be able to have conversation. I think there's no right or wrong way to play. At the end of the day, it's for camaraderie, it's for community. And it's, every strategy is different. And that's what I like about it. I get to put my GM hat on, and, maybe I draft Anthony Richardson and he's horrible and I struck out, or I get him and I have the best quarterback in the league for years. Either way, you're going to have an opinion, and there's a simulation that happens, and we find out, what are the results. So it's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're out here just to talk fantasy football and just see what happens. So Steve, I appreciate you coming on, and have a good one.
You too, Joe.